What's up, YouTube peeps and barbecue freaks? Thank you guys for joining me for another edition of Tito Tuesdays. If you're new to my channel, this is where you ask me questions about barbecue or whatever you like, and I answer your questions. If you have a question, leave it in the comment section below of this video, and I will answer it in my next Tito Tuesday video. So let's get started. All right, so the first video is from John Doe. Brother James, when you let your brisket rest, do you let it rest in a pan in its au jus or on a rack suspended out of the au jus? Does letting it rest in the au jus make it soggy and mess up the bark? So John Doe, it depends. If I'm cooking at home, after my brisket is done, I take it out of the foil and put it in a brand new piece of foil and put that in the cooler to rest. I take the au jus and I separate it in I pour it in my grease separator. I separate the fat from the juice so that way I could save that and use that juice to dip my slices in. Or actually most of the times what I do is I save that au jus for the next brisket cook. So a lot of times when people cook a brisket and they go to wrap it, you'll see them add something like beef broth in there, you know, to kind of add a little beefy flavor. Well, if you use your au jus from the previous brisket, one, it already has some beef broth in it. Two, it has all the flavor in and the seasoning from that other brisket. So just imagine, instead of adding plain beef broth to your wrap, adding beef broth on steroids, if you will. So that's excuse me, if I'm cooking at home, that's usually what I do, is I save that. I separate the brisket from the au jus and I let my brisket rest separately, not in any au jus. Now, if I'm at a cook-off, I do things a little different. At a cook-off, I will let my brisket sit in the au jus. Now, here's the difference in why I do this is why I do it two different ways. At home, I like to cook my brisket fat side up. So if I let my brisket rest, which would be meat side down in the au jus, yes, you do run the risk of your bark getting, like, you know, soggy and that au jus messing up your bark. In competitions, I cook my brisket meat side up, and I'll take my brisket and kind of char it off on the bottom a little bit, and then, because that's the fat cap side, which I'm really not overly concerned about in a competition, because I can always trim that off. But when I char it off and I leave it sitting in the au jus, you're getting some of that char flavor into the au jus. Now in a comp, I'll take that before or after I slice my brisket and separate the au jus and use that to dip my slices in or to brush my slices. So that's why I do it two different ways. In competitions here in Texas, we have to, or at least in IBCA, we have to turn it in meat side up. We have to turn in our brisket slices meat side up. So I cook my briskets meat side up in comps, and you don't want to take that, flip it upside down, especially when you work so hard, you know, to get a nice, beautiful bark. You don't want to turn it upside down and let it just sit in the au jus and just get really soft and mushy. So that's why I do it both ways. So I hope that helps answer your question. All right, next up, K-Town Fishing. He says, what is your favorite thing to cook for the competition? Man, that's a tough one, because I really do enjoy cooking all three meats. So here we do brisket, ribs, and chicken. God, that's tough. I would probably have to say brisket. Second would be ribs. Third would be chicken. While I enjoy cooking all three, you know, briskets, that's like, if you could cook a good brisket, you know, then you're onto something. So there's so much more work that goes into cooking that brisket, getting it just right, getting that bark set, getting it tender to the right tenderness, and just getting it flavorful and just, you know, keeping it moist. That it takes some work to do that. And if you're going to accomplish all those things that you're trying to do in a competition setting when it comes to your meats, I think brisket would be the toughest. So I take a little more pride in that. But I mean, I just love cooking brisket. But they're all like very close, because I do enjoy cooking all three meats. But I would probably have to go brisket, ribs, and chicken in that order. All right, next up, Smoking J&M Barbecue says, "Yo, brother James, what's up? When is your next cook-off?" It's funny you asked that because it's actually this weekend coming up. I will be in Carrizo Springs. Brother Eric from Camp House Barbecue is putting on a competition, and I will be heading south for that cook-off. So it'll be Carrizo Springs, Texas this weekend. All right, next up, the Rich Flavor. The Rich Flavor asks, say, love your channel. Thank you, I appreciate it. If money was no object, what would be your ideal smoker for competitions? And then see, there's a part 2 here. It says, if you had to pick one smoker grill for the backyard, which one would it be? So for competitions, I would have to pick an offset smoker, something like a Jambo or a R&O. There's a lot of smokers that there are multiple companies that are making smokers that are exactly like a Jambo. I love an offset smoker. Like, I love my, set it and forget it smokers, but I will always be an offset smoker guy at heart. And in a competition, you just can't, in my opinion. You get close to it, but I don't think you can actually replicate that offset smoke in a competition. So if I was picking one and money wasn't an object, it would probably be like a Jambo or one similar to that, but it would definitely be a stick burner. As far as the backyard smoker goes, I would, because I do a lot of cooking at home. I do a lot of catering, cooking, just for, almost every weekend I'm cooking. If I had one that I could pick for the backyard or one that I could, pick here at the house, it would have to be like a Southern Pride. Just because I cook so much, I love the rotisserie type of smokers. They can hold a ton of meat, and I think they produce phenomenal. They produce a phenomenal product. So an offset, like a Southern Pride, something like that, a rotisserie smoker would probably be my ideal smoker, just for what I do here at home, and all the cooking that I do. That would probably be what I would pick if I had one, just for the house. So I hope that answers your question. All right, next up and lastly is my good friend Jay Hernandez. Jay says, do the competitions ever get redundant, cooking the same meats pretty much the same way? Or are you constantly looking for new methods or improvements? So Jay, it's a yes to both. Yes, they kind of do get redundant because you're almost doing the same thing over and over, but you are also looking for ways to improve. The game changes, throughout the year. So what might be working one part of the year for the first few months, as time goes on, sometimes that changes, and a lot of it depends on also where you're cooking. If you're in South Texas, North Texas, wherever, you have to do things differently than you would do. If I was cooking in North Texas, I would definitely cook different than I was doing in South Texas. So it does change, and I'm always looking for new tips, tricks, techniques. Also, because now you have a lot of good cookers, and a lot of them are doing pretty much the same thing. So you have to find little things, whether it's a different rub, a different sauce, a different technique, something to set you apart. It might be combining sauces, but something to set you apart from those other cooks, because the game, the sport of barbecue has gotten really competitive, and back in fact, I had a cookout this past weekend, and I was talking to a buddy about this. Back in the day, people didn't salsa briskets. It was frowned upon, but the game has changed so much that if you want to have an opportunity to compete, you have to sauce. So while I do the same thing at each competition, there are times when I switch it up some. It doesn't stay the same every single time. Now, these last few competitions I've done everything the same, but in my next one, I'm probably going to switch it up just a little bit. So while I don't know if I would say that it gets redundant, but yeah, I don't know that I would say that it gets redundant, but I mean, there are times where you're, kind of doing the same thing over, but it's not a problem where I don't mind, because I know these things work. I know these recipes work. What I'm doing works. Now, that doesn't mean that you're gonna win every time with that same recipe. For an example, I did a competition this past weekend. No calls at all. We ran the exact same recipe the competition before that, and we got grand champion. So, while I'm doing the same thing, that doesn't equal the same outcome every time. But that also doesn't mean that you go and, change something up right off the bat just because, it didn't work at this comp. That's just the way that competition barbecue goes. Sometimes you're the windshield, sometimes you're the bug. So I hope that answers your questions. Again, you guys, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already, I would truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. Give me a like, I would appreciate it. And again, if you have a question that you would like me to answer, leave it in the comment section below, and I will answer it in the next Tito Tuesday video. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you guys next time. Take care.